Hey guys, it's the Melblade 5. I never thought this day would ever come, but I am so happy to be wrong. Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door has a remake, and it's here. Even after all this time since its reveal, I still find it so surreal to believe that this game actually exists. The original Thousand-Year Door is one of my favorite games of all time, and part of my holy trinity of RPGs. Ever since I first played it, I fell in love with pretty much everything about it, and that has remained over the many years since. Especially since the later games haven't been, quite up to scratch. Even as someone who enjoyed Origami King for what it was worth, I still found it to be inferior to the earlier games. So as I reminisced on when the series was at its best, it made me really want Thousand-Year Door to get a remake, for both the potential updates and a return to form. For almost a decade, this was my dream video game, but it seemed like a pipe dream. So seeing this remake's announcement after all those years of pining filled me with an indescribable amount of joy. It was to me what the Final Fantasy VII remake was to many others. That reveal was one of the few good things to happen to me last year, and looking forward to it was what kept me going. In addition to all the big improvements and updates they were including, without any major negative changes to put me off buying it like some other RPG remakes as of late. It all culminated into making this another one of my most anticipated games, despite being a remake of a game I've played before. So once the remake came out and I finally had it in my hands, I was absolutely ecstatic to re-experience this adventure all over again. One of the first things that struck me about this remake upon its reveal and when I started playing was just how good the updated visuals are. And I don't just mean how much of a graphical improvement it is over the original, I mean everything aesthetically. The art style stays closer to that of the older games, which I preferred, but takes some influence from the better aspects of Origami King's visuals to add a slight modern coat of paint on top. And the resulting combination is one that makes this game's visuals really pop. More so than any other game in the series thus far. Everything looks so vibrant, with the wide variety of locales you visit looking even better than they did previously, as well as making them that much more memorable to coincide with how unique these locations are for a Mario game, which is one of the many things I loved about the original. Some areas got even more treatment and received noticeable glow-ups I was a big fan of, like Pirate's Grotto for example. The original didn't look bad, but parts of it was just brown. Now it has a much darker and mistier look to it throughout, which better portrays that it is Cortez's haunted domain. Just that one change really elevated my thoughts on that dungeon and Chapter 5 as a whole. And to top it all off is how much charm is still present in the visuals. They maintained the papercraft style without going overboard with it like in the modern games, making the world feel both charming and lively, and not artificial. What also makes everything livelier is all the new animations the characters got. Not just Mario and his partners, everyone. Even minor NPCs got new animations to convey their emotions as they speak, allowing them to be even more expressive to match how much personality is in their dialogue, in addition to exuding their own level of charm. Like, does anyone else notice that Kupiku does the anime girl finger point thing, or whatever it's called? And the last visual-related element that struck me was the many updates to the cutscenes. Generally speaking, they added a lot more dynamic camera angles to some scenes and even revamped certain sequences to make them even cooler. Like the entire intro sequence being animated rather than just looking at the book's pages. I enjoyed noticing when these changes were present since it made watching the story unfold feel more cinematic, which in turn got me even more engaged experiencing it than I already was. Those last two updates were things I didn't even know I wanted from this remake, yet I loved that they added them anyway because they were major additions to the overall feel of the game that felt perfectly suited for it. Then when it comes to the battle system, it remains just as fun as I remember. Everything that I loved about battles in the original are still intact here. The greater synergy between Mario and partners over the first game, all of the fun moves the two of them can perform, the varied badge commands and items to experiment with, the stage hazards, the interactions with the audience, and the crazy special moves are all largely left untouched. Each of which I greatly enjoy in their own right, but when combined together, makes every single battle I run into an absolute blast to play. The battle system is one of my favorite aspects of the whole game, and honestly, it's one of my favorite battle systems in any RPG, as I rarely find myself getting tired of playing them. That's exactly why Chapter 3 is my favorite chapter in the game, because it's mostly just back-to-back fights. While ironically, Chapter 6 is my second favorite, and that has the least amount of battles. And of course, the boss fights allow you to really test your skills and are also just as fun as before. The only thing about battles I had an issue with, per se, was the change to the audience throwing mechanic. In the original, you had to play a game of Where's Wally to find the audience member trying to throw something at you to find out if it's good or bad. But the remake explicitly points it out, while interrupting your actions, which is a little annoying. It makes it easier to react to, as I wasn't the best at that before, but it also removes all challenge it had. Though it is only a minor complaint, and it only came up a handful of times in my playthrough, so it never actively bothered me. There's also the matter of the remake running at only 30 frames per second, unlike the original's 60. This didn't really bother me either. In fact, I didn't even know the original ran at 60 frames per second since I didn't know the GameCube could handle that. So I guess that makes me a fake fan. But the main reason why is because I'm not someone who's super fixated on FPS to begin with. The only reason I bring it up here is because I did have a worry that this change would mess with my timing for action commands, as that's a crucial part of combat. Fortunately, even when using my muscle memory from the original, I was still able to execute them without issue. Actually, though unrelated, I found myself performing even better at some commands. Like, I can actually guard against fuzzies now. I can consistently execute Earth Tremor all the way, and I can consistently get bingos. I was able to get a +5 attack boost from using Powerlift in the Bowser and Cammy fight, and just destroyed them in about 5 turns. So while it would have been ideal for this version to also run at 60 frames, I found that it did not hinder the gameplay at all. And speaking of action commands, the remake also added the Battle Master, a new NPC who allows you to practice your commands. I mainly used him to get better at performing the stylish moves that I often struggled with, as well as super guarding. But I think this is a great inclusion for newcomers to help them learn the commands and improve should they feel they need to, both for the old battles and the few new ones added here, like the optional boss fight against Prince Mush, something I did not expect to see, but it was cool nonetheless, given how he kind of just vanished after being revived in the original. When I attempted this at the earliest opportunity, I went in thinking, it shouldn't be too bad if it's available now. I mean, he's still just a toad. One pretty substantial improvement the remake has over the original are the changes introduced to alleviate backtracking. The original had quite a lot of instances of mandatory backtracking, with several being very mundane. Now, many of these instances have been shortened, including all of the worst ones. The most notable case being with the new pipe room. In the original, the pipes that took you straight to previous areas were spread across several rooms in Rogueport sewers, which you had to unlock once you got Mario's jump and hammer upgrades. But now, they are all in one room, that is also easily accessible via Rogueport's plaza, with each pipe being unlocked after each return trip to the Thousand Year Door, making fast travel much more convenient and, well, faster than before, and shortening the wild goose chase for General White in Chapter 7 from about an hour to under 20 minutes. They took a similar approach to Chapter 4, the one that involves having to repeatedly go back and forth between Twilight Town and the creepy steeple. They added a pipe connecting the two that opens up for the final time you have to guess Dupless's name, thus cutting out the last 2 trips. Another gripe I had with the original was how small your starting inventory was. Only being able to hold up to 10 items at first meant it quickly ended up full and having to toss items for new ones. The remake bumped it up to 15, so you now have more breathing room. Though it does make the upgrade with the strange sack less impressive as it still only goes up to 20, but I got it anyway! Plus, when tossing a healing item, you can instead just use it rather than throwing it away, which I found very helpful for management. So all in all, the few elements of the original I found to be less than stellar are now way more bearable. As for the music, boy did this game deliver on that front. I love the original soundtrack, and I think that the remake overall took it and made it even better. The remixes further enhanced the energy and vibe of the original tracks while still staying true to what I loved about them in the first place. And the remixes I was especially looking forward to hearing in-game, like Rockhawk's theme and the X-Naut Fortress, blew me away once I heard them. Another thing from Origami King they brought over was giving a new rendition of the battle theme for every chapter. The remix of the original is still my favorite, but I really like the other renditions too, particularly the Moon Battle theme. They also made a number of changes to the script, mainly to be more in line with the Japanese version. I'm not a fan of some of these changes, such as the Shadow Sirens now being called the Free Shadows, which is a really boring name I refuse to call them, and the lines altered as a result of people being way too sensitive nowadays. But for the most part, the dialogue remains true to what was seen on the GameCube. All the charming writing, quirky and humorous moments, and even the emotional and darker parts of the game are still present. I was concerned they would tone down or remove these elements because of the modern game's tone, and since they're not things the Mario franchise is really known for. So I was very glad that wasn't the case, as they are a part of what makes the world, story, and characters so lovable and memorable for me. I think this game has some of the most personality of any Mario game. Vivian is still the best partner ever, followed closely by Bobbery. Just need to reiterate that. And to my surprise, this remake added even more personality to the overall experience with how many small changes and updates they made throughout. There were many times during my playthrough where I noticed these small improvements and subsequently thought about how good these improvements were, including those that had nothing to do with gameplay, instead being purely for spectacle. It's those subtle changes that, when all put together, push this remake the extra mile. I can't name them all without taking forever, so for those that especially resonated with me, the new sad music track that plays as you leave the X-Naut Fortress to reflect Tech's farewell, how all of the partners are present when you stand in front of the Thousand Year Door to give a greater sense of camaraderie, how the Thousand Year Door chamber theme adds new instruments with each crystal star to have it build up and gradually get more ominous before turning sinister once the door opens. And especially how they added way more characters to the sequence where everybody cheers Mario on in the final battle. This change adds so much more to the feeling of hope in this moment, to the point that I actually gaslit myself into thinking that it had always been this way, minus the rogue port bit. That's how perfect of an improvement this change was. And as for the final battle itself against the Shadow Queen, I kicked her ass. Yeah, despite her reputation for being really hard, I beat her easily to my surprise. I only had to heal once, and she only got to use her super attack once. They even buffed her slightly in this version, and I still owned her. Thus, I got to reach everyone's bittersweet farewells sooner than I expected before watching a way more entertaining credits sequence this time around. So what are my final, all-encompassing thoughts on the remake? Read the video's title again. This game was completely worth the wait of that almost decade-long dreaming for this to be a reality. And now, there's nothing else I'd really wish for from this. Even with the few minuscule downsides, all the good that was kept, as well as everything else they added or changed, was so much for the better and in such abundance that it hardly matters, including everything I wanted from a potential remake. I think that this is the definitive way to play Thousand Year Door. For me, playing through this remake was basically non-stop fun from beginning to end, in which I got to experience all the feelings I felt when I played it for the first time to remind me why I love this game so much. However, while I may have finished the game, it still isn't over for me yet. At the time of writing, there's still things I need to do, like properly attempting to beat Prince Mush, completing the Pit of 100 Trials and defeating Bonetail, and doing it all over again to face the new super boss, Waka. As daunting as those things sound right now, I'm also excited to try them. But beyond that, the main takeaway I got as I finished it was a stronger desire for this game to have performed well enough and for Nintendo to be perceptive enough that all future Paper Mario games will follow on from this format. I don't want this to be the last time we get a proper Paper Mario RPG in this day and age. I want more of this battle system. I want more partners. I want a fleshed out story and cast of characters. I don't think I could let that all go again. Fortunately, I do have some level of optimism that that wish will also come true. Though regardless of what might happen, I can still rest easy knowing I was given an incredible trip down memory lane that I wanted for so long that should cement Thousand Year Door status for 1,000 years more.